Learning in the Network. Presenting José Mota, Universidade Aberta, Portugal. Thank you.
I'm really honored to read this presentation. And mainly I want to talk about three questions that I think can frame the social software in school. And these questions are, what has changed in the ways that we socialize and learn with technologies? Why is social software important? Why is everyone talking about social software and its importance to learning? And third, why should school be part of this? Why should school be an important part of this? In terms of the forms in which we socialize, they have been changing due to the technological developments, and very well we'll try to characterize the stages in which we see these changes. The first one he calls little boxes. The second one, with globalization, he calls it localization. And the third one, he labels network individualism. Now, this metaphor of little boxes refers mostly to these traditional communities in which you basically connect to your neighbors and your household, your family. So people are connected door to door. They are sort of encapsulated in very homogeneous groups with a very hierarchical structure, parents and kids, employers and employees. This is the kind of metaphor that the little boxes try to describe. Then with globalization, people started moving. People don't live most of the time in the same neighborhood as their relatives or friends anymore, sometimes not even in the same country or town. People often work with other people who are far away in other places. And so this connectivity changed from door to door to place. And now you have a different distribution in the network. You see clusters here that are located in different spaces. Sometimes it could be next door, which is the local part of it, but sometimes they could be placed in, well, far away from where you are physically, and that's the globalization part. So hence this term that he coined of globalization. Then the third stage, the stage in which the developed countries, in mostly perhaps urban areas, are living, is what he calls the network individualism. People are not connected to places anymore. People connect to one another in a network that is very much distributed, as you can see in that representation over there. So what he has this expression that the person has become the portal. So now you connect to another person, and regardless of place and time. Now, in terms of these relationships that we establish and looking into education, what you have today in education technology, the forces that are shaping education technology, are two trends that have converged today. On the side of education, the idea that mere knowledge acquisition is not sufficient to be a citizen in the third millennium. We need to go beyond that. We need to concentrate on the resources and skills that allow us to have a lifelong learning project for ourselves. So keep on developing as a person and learn throughout our lives. And then, of course, we need a structure with support for this. And support comes on the side of technology with all these resources and tools and services that allow for communication, allow for sharing, allow for collaboration, either for leisurely purposes or for professional purposes or for other interests that you have. So, when you look at some of the forms in which people learn, that Jillian will try to enumerate here, you don't see many things new here. Maybe, of course, browsing the internet or making videos is something which is new, but for the rest of it, this is how people have learned for a long time. Interesting is that all of these forms of learning, or at least most of these forms of learning, happen through dialogue with other people, or with interaction with ways, with products, with artifacts, through which these people translated their thoughts or their perspectives. And it's in this interaction and dialogue that your learning develops. And from this point of view, and this idea is also not so much what's new. Learning is always a process of encounters and of experiences. What is really new today is abundance. It's the number of people you can connect to. It's the number of tools you have to access resources that a few decades ago you could never reach yourself. They had to go through other people like a teacher, a professor, to give you this knowledge. And today you have this knowledge accessible to you online on the internet, and many of it for free. And all these tools, what they make is connect people or let people access resources for their learning. Clay Shirky he was the person who generally is thought to have coined the term social software, and he gives a very simple definition. It's just software that supports group interaction, group here in a very general way, of course. These changes in technology and the way people socialize and communicate have also brought about social and cultural changes that are important to shape the way our students, because this is a digital generation that we have growing up with these technologies. This has also shaped the way we look at learning and at social interaction. Three of the things that have clearly changed are creativity, because we are no more just passive consumers of information. We have also become producers of information that we share with other people who consume what we are producing. Our attention patterns have also changed. We now have a flow of information. We are always connecting either through mobile phone, through email, through instant messaging, that makes us have a continuous partial attention to everything that's going on around us. And sometimes we have some difficulty in focusing on a specific thing with our full attention. Identity has also changed, meaning that now that we access cyberspace, we have an expansion of space and time that complements our physical world. Our identity has also become more complex, or to put it in other words, we have more ways of expressing our complex identity than we had before. And so for many authors, this has brought e-learning from a more technological-centered view to a more collaborative or communicative or view of how you learn online with other people. So basically now you still interact and dialogue with people and resources, but you do this in a social context that is very much expanded with the online world. Now, what is then the difficulty? If this is something so good and so important, why is it so difficult sometimes to bring these new potentials into school? Well, technology does not have a very successful history of penetration in schools. There has been work done, many teachers have been doing great things, but there have been difficulties in fully using the potential of technologies in school for a long time. And I think one of the reasons is that people generally try to use new technologies basically to do the same thing they did in the past. They wrote on the blackboard, and then they started showing overhead transparencies, and then they write on the computer and they project there like I'm doing here now for people to read. But basically, I'm not doing anything different than just lecturing and telling other people information which is structured and formalized by me. And so I think the true motivation to use new technologies in school is to question the principles, the educational and pedagogical principles through which I'm trying to use technology. Why do I want to use it and for what purposes? And in that sense, we have this evolution from learning about, which is knowing facts, learning things by memory, learning facts just then to write them in an exam or a test, to learning to be. That is the question of developing skills and competencies and learning to know how to do things and learning to be a better person in the sense that you develop yourself as a person. And this happens not just in a specific moment, this happens throughout the whole of your life. Matthias has an interesting formulation in which he says, this is learning as becoming. This is when these new ideas on learning, on competencies and skills, meet lifelong learning and social web, and the hypothesis of being a learner throughout our lives. He also stresses this importance that while people may look at social software as something into pleasure, to socialize, to have fun on the internet, when you apply these concepts to education and you frame this in an educational context, what you have is that this is a challenge and also the hypothesis of people involving themselves in a global community as global citizens, and not just the social parts of the internet and the high fives or orchids or other social networks like those. This means through blogs and wikis and contacting and dialoguing and interacting with other people, you can express your views on the world, listen to other people's views on the world, and develop meaningful projects for you as a person. And this is important that we understand this. Now, the internet is not that world apart it was in the beginning, where people assumed that everyone had a false identity, and I would pretend to be a woman and you would pretend to be something else. This has been overcome in the last years, and today we're not a different person when we're on the internet. As I said before, it's our identity that has found new ways of expressing our complexity as human beings, and of course the dynamics of the interactions. But basically these worlds are complementary and they expand on one another. Most of the time we have relationships online and offline with the same people, and we just use the medium that in some circumstances we feel is the most adequate or the most convenient for us at that time. So then the third question would be, why is this important to schools? I think it's pretty obvious that if schools shut down to these technologies and shut down to this new cultural and social reality, schools are going to be out of the game. And so they need to open up, they need to get connected to the world, they need to be permeable with flow of interactions and learning and sharing that goes on around every day all over the world, because they need to become part of this global discourse and they need to be relevant in the third millennium in the education and information of our citizens. Now, I don't think you can do this just by improvising or relying on very empty features. You need to have a plan. You need to get the community involved. You need to have parents know why their kids are using social software and why this is important for their education. You need to help teachers and IT staff understand why is social software so important and the kind of things you can do that have an educational value that you cannot find in the traditional classroom. Joseph Fraser yesterday talked here about some problems that we find on the internet. Cyberbullying, for instance, or misbehavior, or illegal content, or sexual predators. Of course, the internet has all of that. And our schools need to protect their children and teenagers, their safety and their privacy. But the answer is not to block and ban services and tools. The only way is to educate our students to use them sensibly and to become real citizens that have a digital literacy that will allow them to connect to the world, to be relevant parts in the world in the global discourse, and at the same time preserve their integrity and their safety while they're at school. These are the authors I mentioned here in this presentation. We have this presentation also available on SlideShare with the rest of there, and if you want to send me an email or call me